All right. Hello, world history students. Hold on one second. I'm gonna play this. All right. So, we're learning about ethnocentrism, and we've actually seen this all year. So, it's something you're very familiar with, but we haven't really put a word on it. So, let's break the word down here. So, the prefix, the beginning of the word is ethno, right? Which alludes to race, people, culture. You think of ethnicity, the word ethnic, ethnicity, race, identity, and things like that. Center is exactly what it sounds like. It's in the center, the main focus, and then ism. The suffix is always an ideology or belief system, right? We've seen a lot about communism, capitalism, authoritarianism, and things like that. So, examples that we see often in America, this idea that people of color aren't as from here as white people are. Just a common example there. But white people and Americans are not the only ones who are ethnocentric. Pretty much everyone has ethnocentric views in some way. But we try not to let it get the best of us. So it's pretty much thinking your own culture is better than another culture, and viewing their culture or the other culture only through that view that it's less than your own. For example, thinking that your religion is the right religion, or thinking that, for example, forks and knives are the right way to eat rather than chopsticks. If you can hear my dog in the background, I'm sorry. So we've seen a lot of political cartoons this year that represent ethnocentrism in the different units we've looked at. So here's one from our China unit, right, about the Opium Wars. And this was a very ethnocentric topic that we looked at. The fact that Britain really pushed opium on China because they felt that, they had the right to access exporting things to China, which the Chinese did not want at the time. We also come back to this political cartoon all year of the white man's burden. And this idea, you have the American Uncle Sam and then the British leader there, and all these minorities that we've looked at, right? Middle Eastern people, Asian people, African, etc., South American, and this idea that we have to bring them to civilization in the right way. So, for example, thinking that covering hair is not right, and that taking a hijab off would be a freeing experience to women, where some women, it's very freeing to wear the hijab. So on that topic, in our Middle Eastern unit, we looked a lot at how the Taliban is very ethnocentric. And the recent takeover in the fall of 2021. We know they had been in power in different areas, and then the U.S. withdrew, and they were able to take complete control. Very ethnocentric views about women and their role in the home, and what's the right way for a woman to live. So we've seen the total reversal of women in the workplace back to women in the home, with the Taliban enforcing their very radical versions of Islam. Which led to the refugee crisis, which we've seen. Back to our China unit, the Cultural Revolution under Mao, very ethnocentric, right? Harming anyone who deviated from what Mao believed to be the right way for the Chinese to move forward. The Little Red Book was one of his ways of enforcing his ethnocentric views on people. We've also seen this in the Soviet Union when we looked at the end of World War II and the intro to the Cold War, with the Berlin Wall and life in East Germany versus life in West Germany, and then life for people behind the Iron Curtain in the Soviet Union itself, and how, the Soviet Union enforced this idea of, this is the right music to listen to, these are the right things to talk about, and if you deviate from that and listen to anything Western, or, listen to the music we don't want you to, we are going to punish you, imprison you, kick you out of college, etc. So that was also an example of ethnocentrism that you're familiar with, but probably didn't know or didn't think of this off the top of your head. So it's not always so straightforward as well. There's like implicit ethnocentrism, right? So maybe some companies don't hire locally because they feel the people in the region aren't as well equipped or whatnot. Many companies will hire certain races over the other, or certain genders over the other, etc. Those are all forms of ethnocentrism as well. So the opposite of ethnocentrism is cultural relativism. So I'm bringing in a new word for you, but it's pretty much the exact opposite of thinking that your culture is the right way and viewing the world through that. So with cultural relativism, the objective is to look at other cultures with the intent of understanding them through their own lens, not through your own. So, for example, the wearing of the burqa in Islamic communities, many people judge that simply because it differs from Western ideas about femininity. However, cultural relativism also has its flaws. Ethnocentrism and cultural relativism, neither of them are perfect. Because cultural relativism, cultural relativism doesn't leave much room for judgment. So what do I mean by that? So cultural relativism refers to not judging a culture to your own standards of what's right and wrong. So, you want to have a certain level of caring about other cultures. For example, with the Taliban's control of women, obviously, we care about that, and we can judge that as maybe not, right. So cultural relativism doesn't really leave much room for that judgment. So for example, many cultures eat insects, which, us in America might think, oh my God, that's crazy. But if you really think about it, it's like meat. It's the same thing as meat. But in other cultures, it's maybe all they have available. They have a long-standing tradition of eating it. It's just really normal to them. So that's it on a really, simple level. It can be anything from that to, how we've seen the Taliban thinking that women, don't belong anywhere besides within the home. So back to America, the popular belief among American ethnocentric people is that their country, culture, values, development, and everything else is superior, which isn't helpful either, right? So how do we judge without thinking we're better than is kind of the goal. In studying history, you don't want to be ethnocentric and you don't want to be too non-critical either, I guess. So we've seen this, in the American coup in Iran, thinking that, the idea that Americans had the right to overthrow the democratic government for their own interests rather than the people in Iran, who are very against that. We've seen this, where else, in political meddling. I'll come back to that. I'll think of an example in a second. So really every culture on Earth tends to have some level of ethnocentrism is what I'm getting at. I'm not trying to paint us as Americans as the only people who are ethnocentric. It's really none of us are what's the word? Are free from experiencing this. We all have some level of this is what I'm trying to say. So though it's an intentional kind of, promotion, you don't want to view the world in totally that your race, your culture is the right way, because that just separates people into categories. Right? So ethnocentrism is insensitive in nature to other cultures, while cultural relativism shows high cultural sensitivity. So this whole unit is about ethnocentrism and you exploring your own topics along those lines that you're interested in. So when you think of ethnocentrism and the regions that you're interested in, you're going to be researching along those lines. Is there any, part of this area or history where people have enforced the idea that their culture is right or better, or their politics is right or better, or economy, etc.?